we're the generation that's almost like the bridge between like an old system and a new system, and we don't know what the new system is yet. But what I do know is that creative thinking is going to be very sought after in the new like system, and even in the bridge into that space.
Welcome to Make Art, the podcast that helps creatives get creative. Our community of entrepreneurs will show you how to turn your passion into a sustainable income-generating endeavor. Broadcasting from Cape Town, South Africa, here's your host, Jerome Rex.
Hello friends, this is Make Art. This is the podcast where we activate your creativity and hopefully inspire you to get out there and be creative yourself. You have talents, you have gifts, and the world needs to see them. And furthermore, the onus is not on you to necessarily fund those exploits yourself. You have friends, you have family, there are people out there who appreciate things of beauty. And there are ways, and should be ways, in which you can somehow monetize your creativity in order to make it self-sustaining so that it is not a drain on the household budget. I always say, as responsibilities increase, now it's not you anymore exclusively, but you're perhaps looking after a partner, spouse, children, these things. So where before you're eating eggs all month because you've printed hard copy CDs, it becomes a little bit more difficult when that money has to come out of the school fees, or something similar, something a little bit more serious. With me today, I have an absolute superhero, Carol Joy Williams. Carol is a composer, a musician, a business owner, a recording artist, and theater maker. She is also a podcaster herself. You must definitely go and check out her podcast after you've listened to this podcast right here. Carol, thank you so much for joining. It's wonderful to have you in the studio, so to speak.
In the studio.
In my Zoom room.
Yeah, this is virtual, I guess, studio space, and it's where I've been spending a lot of time in the last year. So I'm completely comfortable, and it's so nice to be here, Jerome. Thanks for inviting me.
It's wonderful to have you here, Carol. Carol, I'm just wondering, you do all these things. You are so prolific. You have so many, what's the word? Strings to your bow. Is that the term? Am I getting it correct here?
Yeah.
Like, what would you consider your number one talent or your number one ability? What's the thing you identify most closely with?
I think that is like an unfolding pursuit in a way. Like, I think for me, I've done a lot of things that I really didn't like. And that was sort of, quite a long time ago now. I would say probably for like the last 10 years, I've kind of been on this journey of figuring out some of this stuff. And, and so I've tried a lot of things. And in that process, I think I found things that I really resonate with. And I found things that, I thought would be amazing and like totally me. And then I found like, actually, that's not true. But in terms of like a number one thing, I think for me, I love storytelling and I love creative expression. And so I guess if I were to sum up, that's like the golden thread for me through like a lot of what I do is these different expressions of that, and whether it's like telling my own story or helping others to do that, or even in my business, we do a lot around helping brands to tell their stories. I think, that's probably like a good summary of the things that like really make me happy and what I've come to realize I'm actually quite good at. But it's like I say, it's an unfolding thing, and who knows, in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, we could have this conversation again, and it could be a completely different answer. But I think I've also learned in this process that that's also cool. I think we have this idea that we need to get to some destination, or it's once I've done this or once I've done that, then I'm going to feel like the sense of fulfillment, or like then I'm going to be this creative person. But I don't know, my experience has been a little bit different from that.
Wow, this is going to be a really easy podcast. You give such great answers. That was awesome. And
Well,
it
I would hope
probably will
so,
be.
you
It
know.
probably will be something completely different, eh? I was talking to a friend of mine
Mm,
last night, and we were speculating, and he was saying, he's this prolific guitarist. He's so gifted, and his son is like, meh, guitar. I could take it or leave it. And I was telling him that
mm,
the things that they will be doing one day, in all probability, don't even exist today. We're
yeah,
preparing them for this
yeah.
world that is totally foreign and it is totally unfamiliar, just at the rate at which things are progressing. So yeah, I fully expect you to be busy with
Mm.
something completely different in 5 to 10 years' time, but still something
Yeah.
awesome because
Yeah, I would hope so.
yeah, well, awesomeness is
Yeah.
consistent with how I've come to know you and your brand. um,
Yeah, hopefully I won't be an accountant in 10 years. Although you never know. I
yeah, who
mean,
knows? Who knows?
maybe I'll get really gifted at numbers somewhere along the line. It's unlikely,
Anything,
but
anything is
anything
possible,
is
Carol.
possible.
Let us not discount accounting. No disrespect to the accountants out there. We respect you.
No,
Just the
I'm
dark
so
art.
grateful for you. You helped me with my tax. Thank you.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Oh, people who help you with your tax is such a blessing. Oh, it's just, yeah,
You're,
let's not get into
yeah.
that. Carol, tell us about your business. You say you help businesses tell their stories?
Yeah, so I have I co-own and run a business called the Stellar Effect, and it's actually like we South Africa's first creative audio agency. Back in the day, like in 2017, when podcasting wasn't really a big deal in South Africa, we got into that space. Which, like, how we got there is another story, but yeah, we kind of started out wanting to do music production for like film and that kind of thing, and we sort of had that going, but it just didn't feel like, I don't know, it just didn't feel like it was quite clicking. And then we started exploring podcasting, and that's really where we've ended up now, which, it's 2021 now, and podcasting is definitely taking off more in South Africa, and more brands are, I think, seeing the value of a podcast, for example. Yeah, so I think last year was actually quite a big year for us, unexpectedly, like even though it was such a crazy year with COVID and all of that, our business really took off last year, which we're so grateful for. And basically, like, we do everything podcasting. So from like the strategy and ideation side of like things, to content design, to composition of the audio brand sound, or like the jingle is what a lot of people would call it. And yeah, and then we do the script writing, we do pre and post creative and technical production. So it's really like a one-stop shop for podcasting. And then we also do the audio brand sounds, which, like I said, that's a jingle. But our sort of thing with that is creating almost like an audio identity for brands. Like brands have got a visual identity. They've got their logo and their fonts and their colors. And our sort of thing with the audio branding is to create like a music or audio identity for the brand. So we do that. We also looking at expanding into like a few other things, but basically like everything audio at the moment.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then you've also started your own podcast recently, the Navigating Life podcast with Carol Joy
Yes.
Williams. Boom, boom. That must act as a really nice business card as well for people to go and check out what can be achieved.
Yeah, I think so. I think, I had the idea of a podcast, and like for many years, various friends and even our business coach was like, you really should have your own podcast, if this is what you're doing in the market. And I was like, I'll get there. Like we basically bootstrapped our whole business. So I was working a lot of other jobs to kind of pay the bills while things were growing. And last year was the first year that I worked full time in the business, which was a massive leap of faith. But anyway, the point is, like, I haven't really had the capacity, and I also didn't want to just do something for the sake of it. Yeah, and so this year it felt like things had stabilized a little bit in many ways, and so I I just felt like I had the creative capacity to make something really awesome. And that's, I started the Navigating Life podcast. Actually, a friend of mine at the beginning of the year, he was like, so you keep talking about this, like, when are you going to actually start? And I'm like, oh, could you just shut up? Thanks. But actually, it was so good. Like holding me accountable, like really awesome. And I launched in March with a prologue, which is basically like where I just introduced what the podcast was going to be about. And then I've got 2 episodes out so far. I'm just doing like one a month. If you do listen to them, you'll hear it's a narrative style podcast, which, I've produced a lot of like, interview-based podcasts, for clients and that kind of thing. And I really wanted to do something a little different, just also to, like flex my creative muscles a little bit. So that's kind of what I've gone for. It's been really fun. It's called Navigating Life, like you said. And I just felt like, there's so many podcasts out there that, are like self-help or whatever. And mine are not self-help. I call it like a personal journal, like in the personal journal genre. So it's not only my story, it's other people's stories as well. But I'm like interested in the storytelling aspect of how people are experiencing life, for example. So that's kind of what I'm going after in this. And it's like, I'm just learning as I go in terms of how to craft the content. And then I've also started writing soundtracks because it's also like a nice way to bring my music into it and the composition side of it. So I'm almost like, what I'm trying to do is and this has been some cool feedback that I've got from people who know me that have listened. Like they've said, it felt like I was sitting and having a cup of coffee with you. And like, that's cool. I want people to feel connected. I want them to feel like they've had a full audio experience, where they've had like some good content to listen to, where they've heard some beautiful music. I also feature other people's music in my podcast. Like I thought about like, all the radio shows that I loved, like in the 90s, they always like played out with a song, So I've kind of brought that back in my podcast. So either a poem or a song of like a fellow creative. Even my theme music isn't mine. Like the song that is the theme music is a friend of mine who like so kindly offered for me to use that song. And it's a freaking cool song. And I love that the medium allows for storytelling, it allows for music, it allows for like having really complex conversations about stuff. And I also get to like showcase some of my friends and their talents. So that's kind of a very long answer to your question, but that's what the Navigating Life podcast is about. And it's on all the platforms. Like if people want to listen, you can just go search for it. And the byline is what the beep is going on. And I just felt like that was quite apt for the state of where we find ourselves as adults in the world, as still fairly youngish adults. I'll just claim that.
Go for it. We are
median. Still really grappling with a lot of things. And I think what you were speaking about earlier about, the world is shifting like so quickly, and we kind of, the job I do now didn't exist when I studied. And so I've had to adapt, and I'm so grateful. Like I love it. But I think there's a level at which, we're the generation that's almost like the bridge between like an old system and a new system. And we don't know what the new system is yet. But what I do know is that creative thinking is going to be very sought after in the new like system, and even in the bridge into that space. And so anyone who's listening, who's like got that way of thinking and has always felt like a little bit random and like the person that is, like the lone voice that no one really understands, I really feel like your time is coming. So yeah.
Oh, that is beautiful. That's well said. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you said that. Carol, I must apologize. I must give you some credit. I just assumed, I'm like, where's she pulling these sounds from? I caught the prologue and I caught the first episode, and I just found the sound design like really relaxing, like your friend said, like sitting down and having coffee with you. Like you could have this playing in the background, even without listening to what you are saying, just having you speaking in the background. Of course, I
Wow.
listen, but I find it really relaxing, and it's interesting to hear now that of course, everything is curated. Of course, everything is thoughtfully put together.
It's a,
That's
you
how I
know
know
what,
you.
and just this is like the other thing, right? Is like as a creative, creating creative assets is it's important. We've got to keep on creating assets. Whether we earn money from them right now or not is really not like the main thing, or that's kind of how I think. And, so even doing like a soundtrack or the composition side of it, yeah, I could like totally use stuff from somewhere else. It would probably be quicker. But what I've been thinking about is like, cool, imagine like after a whole season of my podcast, I release an album that has the soundtracks of all the, it's kind of
Wow.
thinking like that, it's, and also it's an outlet for me. Like I don't often get to just sit and compose at the moment. Like having a business is pretty full on. And so for those like, I don't know, that hour where I just get to sit and like play the soundtrack and play with sound, it feeds my soul. I mean, like never mind anyone else's. It's totally about me in that moment. But I'm also interested, and I always have been, in like the connection between like a spoken story and music. Like, if we think about film is like quite lame without the soundtrack. Or it's not lame, but you like, those suspenseful moments or those sad moments. I just think like music brings such an expression to our lives. I mean, if I had my way, I would have a soundtrack playing wherever I went, like.
Yeah, no, I got you. I have a morning soundtrack. I used to
Yeah.
I used to work in the CBD, and when I got off at Cape Town Station, I'd pop in my headphones and I'd pick up the pieces of the average white band.
Like
Got like a
get your
strat
vibe.
going. Yeah. Pointed people like strangers as if I'm greeting them. Hey, like Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man where he's having that moment. Yeah, but I digress.
I wish I'd seen you, Jerome. Next time you do that, let me know. I'll come spectate.
Yeah, it's unlikely, but yeah, I'll let you know should that ever happen. Carol, without giving away too much I certainly don't need to give away anything that people should be paying for, but you were talking about how you thought about your podcast and thought through it and tried to differentiate it within the market. Just for other people who are listening or considering starting a podcast, how would they go about initiating that process, kicking off that process of thinking, how do I differentiate myself? How do I make something that isn't just like the next thing, but that is different enough that it has a bit of a unique appeal?
I think for me, content creation, whatever that is, whether it's a video or a podcast or your social media or a magazine or a theater show, all of that essentially is content in a way, I guess, or creative content. But and I know this is probably going to sound cheesy, but I think it's really important to be authentic and to create something that resonates with you, both as a just in general as a person. It resonates with you as a creative. It needs to resonate. I always think anything creative needs to come from an overflow of who you are and kind of what you think and what you believe, and also from your own life experience. I think often people have this idea, and I see this a lot in the music industry, and I mean, it's partially true. You need to write a hit song, and if you want to write a hit song, it needs to sound like this, the words need to be this. There is that is true. I'm not saying that stuff isn't true, but I think especially with podcasting as a genre of media, if you want to call it that, it's very time intensive to make. And so if you're just making something that you think people are going to like and you don't actually resonate with it, I don't think you'll get past 2 episodes. You'll probably give up after a little while. it'll be like, oh, actually, this, is actually way more effort than it feels worth.
This is too much work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so much work. And actually, like, I'm having to dig deep or like be someone I'm not in order to create this. And so, like, yeah. And then I think the other really good question, and I think we need to ask ourselves, whatever endeavor you're busy with. And we ask ourselves this a lot. We ask our clients this a lot, actually. Like, time in terms of like, people have a certain amount of time in their day, in their week. Why should they spend that 20 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever listening to your podcast? Like, what are you offering them? That is, so is it entertainment? Is it like advice? Is it like conversation? Is it an audio like journey and experience? Is it encouragement? Like really understand what you're hoping to achieve with that. And then create it with that in mind, and how do you do that? It's like any business. Like, ask your friends, like, what are the things that you would like to know about? What are the things that you feel aren't being talked about, or that you would like to hear a different perspective on, maybe. And I think in South Africa, like, we're very much in the early adopter phase still of podcasts. There are so many gaps. Language, can you create a podcast in something other than English? Like and I see some of your podcasts in Afrikaans, Jerome, and I love that. I mean, I'm like, that is so cool, because in a way you also, yes, you're creating for like maybe an Afrikaans market, but you're also saying that Afrikaans as a language is important. It's like you're showing your value for the language and the fact that that's part of who you are as a creative by doing some of your podcasts in Afrikaans. And I love that. And whether that's Afrikaans, or Xhosa or whatever it is, like, find your market like in that space as well. Yeah.
It's also about authenticity for me, Carol, because I have Afrikaans speaking guests who communicate better in Afrikaans, or, and then we'll speak in Afrikaans. I think it ties into your previous point about authenticity. It's like, if this is an Afrikaans speaking guest here, we're not going to spend the entire conversation being uncomfortable in English when we could be a lot more comfortable in Afrikaans. But yes, thank you for defending Afrikaans there. That's probably the Pretoria girl in you showing through. And just make
as long as you don't ask me to do an interview in Afrikaans, we fine.
Just be comfortable.
Yeah, my matric tweede is like a very long time ago. So, and actually, I learned to speak proper Afrikaans when I worked on the Cape Flats. So I don't know if that's the type of
okay. Yeah, you see, you're opening up a whole other can of worms here. There's a raging debate about what is Afrikaans and what is Afrikaans. Right, yeah, but that's Afrikaans, by the way, just so you know. That's also Afrikaans.
I fully agree. I think I just learned a lot of terms that weren't always necessarily that polite. Like
okay. Yeah, we will not ask you to share those here for obvious reasons.
I was working with kids though who I think took great delight in teaching me those things. So
for sure. Carol, you've given a lot of useful information there. I like where you talk about starting with the end in mind and knowing what the purpose is and knowing where you're going before you start creating, which is a huge source of frustration for me when friends of mine jump into things without considering that, because I'm like, that informs everything you do. It informs the format, it informs language, it informs sound production. All those things are informed by what your purpose is, your end point is. And if you haven't considered that, it can make it like, where are you going? What's your roadmap? I'm just venting here. Thank you for listening.
No, it's, what, I think that is so true. And I vent often about sort of so-called creatives, and I don't mean that in like a condescending way at all. I just think a lot of people have this idea, and I don't know where we got this narrative from, but that to be creative, you need to be like really disorganized and like not know anything, and it's just about the art and it's about whatever. And I'm like, that's cool, like, but you're not gonna go anywhere with that. And I think, I've had to learn discipline. It doesn't necessarily come naturally. Like time management did not come naturally to me. But I recognized that like if I really wanted to pursue some of these creative things and creative endeavors, then I actually needed to learn something like time management and almost like be very strict with myself. And we're not slaves to our like how we wired, or like, you know, it's, yes, sometimes, I mean, I do also need to make space and time for that creative side of me that just like staring out the window for like 2 hours, you know. I also make time for that. It's important because a lot of like my ideas sort of kind of start forming. As creatives, I think we need to make time to be bored, you know. That's often where like a lot of really good stuff comes from. But you can't only do that, because then, like you said, you're going to be taking your, you know, the money you need for various things from your kids' school fees, or just not do anything at all, or not, you know, start something and not complete it. And then, you know, I know that for me, that was a cycle. I had like hundreds of incomplete projects behind me. I had never actually finished one. And that's also been a lesson for me, is like I'm very inspired by ideas. Like that's one of my, you know, biggest strengths, is having lots of ideas, but I've also had to learn how to implement them, or else partner with other people that help me implement them. And I think that's something that I've like really also just seen in you, Jerome, and something I love about your work is that you're not only, you know, having all these cool ideas, but you collaborate and you create spaces for other people. And then you also like make it happen. You write the show and then you perform the show. You know, it's not just this whole time like, oh, but I've got this idea for a show, and then it just stays being an idea for a show. Like you actually go through that. And I'm sure in your journey as well, you've had to learn how to implement those things. Like it doesn't, you don't, the first time you do something, you don't know what you're doing. The second time you do it, you don't know what you're doing. Often the 50th time you do it, that's only when you really start like figuring it out. But if you gave up on like try number 1 because like you only got 5 likes on your video, then, you know, you're not going to build anything. And please don't do something to be famous. That's like the worst idea. It's just like, just do something because it's like a natural thing for you. You feel like you have something to say. You have the skill and the ability to do it. That's like a really good thing. If you're doing it so that you can be famous or an influencer or whatever, that I'm not saying that's a bad goal to have as well. You know, to grow your impact and to grow your influence and stuff. But I never think that should be like your main reason why you start something, because then you're not going to want to do the hard stuff that comes along with this journey, you know, because it doesn't look like the picture that you think it should look like. And yeah, and then you give up, you know. I did that a lot. I only really started like pulling myself towards myself probably like in my 30s. So, you know, there is time, but and I learned a lot. Like I said earlier, I did lots of different things. Like I had this dream of doing theater, you know, as my full-time career. And then I got the opportunity to do theater, and it was freaking hard. And working with people in theater was crap, to be honest. And I was like, okay, new dream. Like that was so cool. And like I've done some theater stuff now, like of shows that I wrote, and then I also get to pick who I work with, etc. But it's not a bad thing. I think especially if you're a younger person and you're listening to this, like explore stuff. Don't, unless obviously there are some people where it's like they just know that they're talented at something, the opportunities are coming to you, etc. That's cool. Then but that's like such a small percentage. And it doesn't mean that your story is any more or any less valid just because it's different. And it's a different path to creativity. And whether 5 people listen or 5 million people listen, like, would you still do it? And if the answer is yes, then you're probably like in the right space.
Then go for it, yeah. I'm so passionate about breaking down those stereotypes, like you've mentioned. That like as artists, there's this perception of the starving artist and of this flaky person who wears tie-dye and pastels and who can't respond to emails on time and who is always missing deadlines. And I'm really, really passionate about breaking those stereotypes down because, of course, they find their root in truth. Creatives are, musos are, and like notoriously bad at invoicing on time, at meeting deadlines, at filling in forms and doing the administrative things, but it's such a crucial part of being successful in business or being successful as a creative entrepreneur, because you need to be able to do those things as well. And
Yeah.
I'm all about breaking down those stereotypes, and being disciplined. And for myself, it's also not easy. I'm terrible at email. I'm terrible at filling in online forms and applications and the like. But as you say, you have to discipline yourself and you have to kind of grit your teeth and just bear through
And
it,
do it.
and do it and get it done. Yeah. And that being said, I was just wondering, Carol, in your own business, you're a business owner. You've been doing your own thing for a long, long time. What are some skills that you have had to learn that you don't necessarily enjoy doing? Things that you aren't crazy about, but that you've had to do that are a necessity for the work that you do.
Yeah, I think things like project management. So yeah, really making sure that and the thing is, like, you can act, I'm quite good at that, but I don't enjoy it. Like, and it doesn't bring me life, but it's just one of those things, because we like a really small team. It's something that I've taken on, and it's, so making sure that projects run smoothly. It's like all the admin associated with that, setting up emails, setting up meetings, setting up schedules, like recording schedules, all of that stuff. Like, honestly, I'd far rather be either busy with the high level business stuff or like creating my own things. And you know what the cool thing is I've been doing that now for like the last three or 4 years or whatever. And now we're getting to a stage where I am probably going to be starting to hand over that stuff to someone else, which is so amazing. But it's like, it's taken this long. And if you're going to be a diva and be like, well, that's not actually like my gifting, then you're probably not going to succeed. So I think that's always been my thing, is like, eventually I want to have make so much money that I can pay people to do the stuff I don't like doing.
Awesome. That's the goal. Yeah, that's the dream.
That's the goal, but that takes time. And so I think like project management side of things, like all of that, things like keeping kind of when I started, I think, and for me, I think it's always good to understand what is the root of why I don't like this. Sometimes it's like you just don't like it, and other times it's more fear-based. So I was kind of keeping tabs on all our finances, and I actually really enjoy that now. Like, I love a spreadsheet. I used to hate spreadsheets, but that was actually rooted in like a fear thing and like a stupid hangover from like maths in school, where I was like really not great, didn't really do very well in maths. And I was feeling like, incompetent. But again, that was something that I've like now taught myself to do. I remember having to like submit our first budget to like a client, and I didn't know how Excel worked. And I was like having a crash course with my friend on the phone, like 10 minutes before we needed to submit the proposal. But, so like I say, like, I think that's also the thing. Sometimes there are going to be things that you think you don't like. And then actually when you start seeing the benefit of it, like now, I get so excited when I balance the books at the end of a month, or when I look at like our cash projections for like the next 6 months. And then, that all enables us to like start dreaming of what our next project is, or like, what is our next creative endeavor? Like, how do we grow this further? And we're only able to do that because we've like managed the finances well up to now. And so if you can start seeing things like admin and like keeping track of your finances and invoicing on time, if you can see those things as like enablers to, it's the structure that allows your creativity to flourish, then why wouldn't you do it? You know, it's like the fact that I actually have now, again, I mean, it takes a long time. You need to have like a long-term vision here, but now I have the freedom to create my own podcast. And you know what? I'm not doing that in the evenings and on the weekend. I mean, unless I really want to. I'm doing it during work hours because I've got the freedom to do so at the moment. And like that for me is like so worth learning how to be a bit more disciplined with emails or with the finances or with whatever it is, because it's actually like enabling a higher level of time and creativity. I'm creating the life that I want to live in. And I think people want that. They want that, but they don't necessarily want the hours and years of hard slog. For me, like working, like, you know, I'm not married. I don't have a second income. And I was like, I'm not going to let that be a reason why, you know, and I also don't come from like a rich family who's like bankrolled any of this. Like I've done every single part of this, like, and I'm very grateful. Like there's been so much grace on it. Like I'm not taking the credit in that sense at all. God has been like so faithful in so many ways, but I think that the truth of it is like there's always going to be a reason why you can't do something, and there's always going to be a reason why someone else is doing better than you're doing and whatever. But it's like just deciding that if that's really what you want to do. And like I say, for me, up until last year, I was working like 5 or 6 jobs, and I wouldn't advise that like for you know, for your soul or your sanity. But again, like, what do you want? And if you want that thing, and if you feel like that's what you're going after, then you do what you do, and you pay the cost. And eventually, and it's a total gamble, because especially with this business, we had no idea if it was going to work or not. But either way, you learn from it. And I think that's like really valuable as a creative, is to have that curious mindset and to have a growth mindset, and not like this final destination mindset, you know?
Absolutely. The process is all important. The process is the thing. Like the process is the journey. It's not about your destination. It's about what's happening now. And I love how you're mentioning about all these things that you had to learn. Those are valuable skills. Because one day, when you are in a position to hand these over to somebody, you understand enough, you know, like Jared says, you're dangerous enough that this person can't do you in, or they can't, you know, they can't.
It's like, you can't pull the wool over my eyes with the finances or the books, because I know where to look, you know, I know. It's like, you're going to try to steal money from me, I'm going to know, like, you know, so yeah.
And it cuts both ways. I think there are things perhaps that you enjoy doing, where by necessity, as the business grows, you might have to hand those things over as well. And that's also a discipline, handing over things that you like and things that are really
You're
precious.
preaching to me right now, Jerome. You can ask Jason, my business partner. I'm very bad at those things. It's like, he's like, has to almost like pry them
out of your hands.
Yeah. So no, you're so right. It does cut both ways.
Indeed. Well, there you have it, gents. Those of you who are more observant will have heard her say that she's not married. Have at it.
But she's also not single. But anyway, that's fine.
Carol,
but you know, nothing's official until there's nothing's official till the wedding. So
yeah, okay, there you have it. Carol, I'm curious, just to further explore the whole storytelling aspect of your creativity and of your personality. You were talking about your background in theater and as a theater maker. When I met you, you were busy with these productions. You were part of a 2-man production, a 2-woman production, pardon me, called Enough and More. And I just could never get to one. I remember you telling me at the time, we're both being so awesome, busy being so awesome that we can't get to each other's shows.
Yeah, that's true. We were both like, doing all sorts of things at that time.
Yeah, and it's like, I want to go to your show, but I can't because I'm gigging. And then it's like, anyway. Be that as it may. I'm curious about that. Like, are you still involved? Is there still an interest in putting on productions? Perhaps you could just give a little bit of background about Enough and More as a production in and of itself. And then if anything is incubating with regards to the
Okay,
future.
with that. So I think like that whole that was such a cool thing. Like I'd like I said, often wanted to do theater. I hadn't really, it was one of those things which I, maybe wanted to study, but then I did kind of didn't, my family wasn't that keen on it. So I did something else and kind of kept feeling like I'd maybe missed the mark on that. Anyway, and then I met Mary, who's the other half of that duo, and she had done lots of shows, and she did study drama and all of these things, and we had like just a cool connection the first time we met, and really I think bonded over humor. So we'd have like a lot of laughs together and just laugh at how ridiculous people are, mostly at ourselves. We share like these awkward stories about things that had happened to us, and that's kind of where it grew out of. And as a joke, the one day we made this clip about these two, like, people two ladies from Sea Point. I mean, you can imagine the personas. And we were actually just having a laugh. We were like, we were just having a laugh, and we posted it on our social media, and like, it like got a lot of response. People were like reposting it. We got contacted by this like quite big blog, and they wanted to do a feature on us, and we were like, oh my gosh, we better like make a profile. We didn't agree with nothing on any of these things anyway. And that's kind of where it started. And we'd done 1 or 2 shows as well, and we wanted to explore this idea of like transformative theater, so having theater but also saying something in that. So we've always felt, Mary and I, like laughter is such a good anesthetic. You kind of make people laugh, and then you can say some hardcore truth and it's like people are a little bit more receptive because they're laughing. Like, it's that's why comedians, that's why people like Trevor Noah are so amazing, because there are things that he gets to say that, like, if anyone else said it, it would be like a total uproar. People would be like hugely offended. But because he's funny and because he's like known for that, it's, people are, and there's like that moment of reflection, where you're like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, that's totally me. Anyway, so that was kind of where we started. And it really, it was so, like I say, it was so cool. And I think for me, it was that process was an incubator for me as a storyteller, like learning how to put things together, how to tell jokes, how to interact with someone on stage. And we, in 2019, I think our biggest show was like, we did a barnyard show in Durban. I mean, that was like totally beyond like anything I ever imagined, like happening from these first little like silly videos we made, And then Mary moved to the States. I think she moved at the end of 2018. So we then carried on with like our online stuff. And then 2019, she came back to South Africa for 3 months. We did a few shows. We did the Cape Town one, we did the Durban one. And then I think, there was sort of talks of maybe doing some stuff in the States last year, but then COVID happened. So I don't, to answer your question, like, I don't know. I don't feel like our sort of collab or opportunity of I think we have very similar things on our hearts, and how that will look in the future, I'm not sure. At the moment, like, Mary's about to become a mom, so that's for the first time. So that's really like where her focus is. And obviously, I think she really, she moved to the States and needed to actually like live in the States, if that, be present to her life there, and the way that things have shifted. And for me, I also, business wise, like that's been quite an intense focus for like the last 18 months. So I'm sure like in the future I'm hoping there'll be like maybe like a chance for more of that kind of thing, and also like would be totally open to creating those types of projects with other people. I think like before we started recording this, Jerome, you and I were chatting about like some of the shows that you're working on, and yeah, I definitely have an interest. I love working on creative projects, where it's like we agreeing to this thing and this is what we're working on, and it's kind of got an end in mind. It's not like, you're in a band that is going to be around for 40 years. Like, that's not the expectation. I quite like the sort of dipping in and out of different projects and stuff. So yeah, but so nothing on the cards there at the moment. We also haven't, because then we also got like quite a, well, not massive, but like, some following on social media, and we were posting up until around August last year, I think. And there were obviously some very funny moments, thanks to lockdown and whatever, which, the various people that we represent were not enjoying. And we had some good laughs. I'm trying to be very PC here, Jerome.
No, you're doing so well. You're doing so well. Carol, it's been so much fun. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing just valuable insights as from your career, being a creative, and also as a business owner and a creative business owner, where those things intersect, I think is really where we are finding ourselves in the time that we are living in. Like, this is the time for the career creative. This is the time for people who they have this creative ability, but are also able to leverage the more mundane things and the administrative things in order to make things happen. So it's wonderful to see it in practice, and to kind of look at you yourself and Jason, your business partner, as a case study of this is how it's done, and when it's done well.
I think we could be a case study of a lot of things, Jerome. Like, how sane are we? I don't know. I think that would be an interesting case study also.
Yeah, options abound. Carol, before we wrap up, I'd love to just hear a little bit about what it is you're busy with. Where can people get hold of you? Where can people get hold of the Stellar Effect? Where can people find your music? I mentioned you are a recording artist as well. How can we get in touch with all those things and follow the rest of your journey as it unfolds?
Awesome. So probably the place I engage the most is on Instagram. So that's Carol Joy Williams. You can follow me there if you like. And yeah, so, and that's kind of where I post about my podcast and music and all sorts. I'm also on Facebook, Carol Joy Williams. I've got a page, so if you want to search that. Then I also have a website, caroljoywilliams.com. There isn't, like, just my podcast is on there at the moment, but I am planning on kind of putting my music and a few other things on there at some stage. But yeah, caroljoywilliams.com. You can listen to my music on SoundCloud. That's where it lives at the moment. Also, everything just Carol Joy Williams, basically, on SoundCloud. And then, yeah, if you want to connect with my business, the Stellar Effect, that's the Stellar, STELLAREFFECT.com. Yeah, and you can also check out on our website, we've got show reels of some of the projects we've worked on. So you can, if you're interested in hearing like some of our work, you can go and check that out. And it's also, we kind of just unpack a little bit about what we do on the website. So that's probably a good thing. And then like we said a little bit earlier, my podcast on all the different podcast channels, and it's called the Navigating Life podcast. There are a few of those. So again, just search my name and you'll find me. Basically just Google me. Then you'll come up with something.
She's that big, guys. Just Google it.
No. Well, let's Google Jerome Rex. We'll have the exact same more situation. And if it's like there's this other lady, I don't know, it looks like an older lady in Canada. I think her name's also Carol Joy Williams. That's not me, guys. So
wow. Useful information. Yeah. Thank you for that, Carol.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever Googled yourself? It's fascinating.
Yeah, I try not to. Try not to.
Yeah.
I'm
anyway,
not.
Yeah. So
I'm not saying I have it. I'm just saying I try not to.
Try not to. No, I don't do it often either. But, it's more like, is my podcast coming up in the Google search? If I'm telling people to search with my name, like, is it coming up? So anyway.
True. What do people see?
Yeah, but those are, what do they, well, they see like old photos of like random articles I wrote, like, I don't know, 10 years ago.
Opens Google. Let's get in here. Okay, while I do this, while I Google
Yeah.
you, Carol Joy Williams, thank you very much for
Yeah.
spending time. It has been absolutely awesome chatting to you. So insightful, so revealing. Thank you so much for just being honest, for being vulnerable, for being real, and for being open with like this
Yeah.
solid goal. You've got all this information and you just give it freely. It's really, really wonderful. That's wonderful.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, man. I really I so appreciate the opportunity. I want to see creative people flourishing. I want this to be like, our kids can come and say, mommy, I want to be a graphic designer, I want to be an artist or a songwriter. And then we're like, yes, that's an amazing idea. Not like, oh my gosh, why would you do that? So yeah, that's also I just so value you being in the space and encouraging people and using your voice as well. So thanks so much. And anyone out there who's like considering stuff, like just start somewhere and see what happens. So yeah, looking forward to hearing how this network and community of yours grows even more, Jerome. It's really cool and really needed. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Carol.